Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're on page 1340. So to sum up and review what we learned, two levels, essentially, in the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim themselves, those 13 divine attributes of compassion, and then their source in Gvuras of Atik, in the Nikras Hatzur, the crevice, the cavity within the rock, which is Gvuras of Atik, Butzina de Kardanisa, the Reshimu, that manifests the Gvuras of Atik in Meiches Tema, in the superconscious from which originate the 13 attributes of compassion. So he explained the difference between Se'er and Dvash, the two substances that are not, that you don't bring, you can't bring, you don't, saktiru, should not bring it as an offering, because they both are gvuras. The difference, however, is gvuras or din de gvuras de katnus, din de katnus, or din de gadlus. One is a gvura, sour and bitter, and chmitzus, it's intense, so it's like a state of diminishment. And the other is a gvura that comes the opposite. It's too much sweetness that you can't eat, like dvash, honey. Both are a form of punishment in the negative, because one is a punishment through deprivation, and the other is through overwhelming, too much light, as we learned. But another difference is that one is not connected to such sin and crime. It's to misguided avodas Hashem. Like with Ben Zoma, or he brought Noach as an example when he drank, and other examples with it coming from an Aveda, from Aveda of a tzaddik, but it's misplaced or misguided because it's getting too close and ultimately causes the damage that it does. Like eating too much honey, where it becomes destructive. But it's still in Yoni Aveda. But the MS, like he said, you're talking about a high level people who their Aveda is negeya, very much important to God and to heaven, and causes a deep impact. And that's precisely why, because of its greatness, if it's misguided, it can also cause problems. But it's still not considered a sin. You said nira, that this is din de godless, is neshama shanhogim and bechinas meichen de godless. These are souls that the behavior, the divine providence with them is in a meichen expansive way. Din de kadnus, on the other hand, the other extreme, sa'ir, not dvash. The leaven is through chedva oven mamish, God forbid. Now here we're talking about where, like with yeast, that causes, like he says, etzem agvuras, that confuses things, and it mixes the pselas, the waste, with the good parts, and that's gvuras the kanus. And there we're talking now already the level of Russia, the opposite of it's confusion and disturbance. The opposite of sheket, of shkita menucha, peace and calm. So just as like a difference so we have now the difference between se'er and dvash and se'er. So too the tshuva is different. The tshuva in dvash is a tshuva that comes from kiruv, from closeness, tshuva ma'ava. Because we're dealing with that tzaddik, but it was misguided, so now you have to guide it correctly, and then channel properly those gvuras, to receive them in a proper way. But that's a tshuva ma'ava, like he says, kiruv, and that's primarily coming from the divine soul. Whereas the tshuva connected to sa'ir, an actual sin, is coming from distance and distress, min ha'meitzar, and that's the tshuva from the animal soul, which is far more intense. B'cheliyat is a far more intense and stronger tshuva than the first one from love. And therefore the hamshachah finally is also different. The hamshachah from the first tshuva of gadlus, of dvash, is from Yud Gimel Tzamachimim, that dispels the darkness, but from without, it's so powerful it just gets rid of the darkness. In kadnus, you have an element of kas and siluk, there's been a diminishment. There has been an actual, like in Golus, a diminishment of the divine presence. And that causes a Gedoyin, but it's not a true Gedoyin. And on the contrary, it actually elicits a much more powerful energy. That's where Kas comes from. And when it's transformed through Tshuva, you're mamshech something even higher than the regular Yud Gimel Midas Sarachimim in the first level of Dvash. And we mamshech something higher than Yud Gimel Sarachim from the Helam Ha'atzmi of the Nikras Tzur. That's what we learned so far. That's a summary of yesterday's class. Yeah. Now he's going to continue to explain the new paragraph we'll continue to read by Inyan Hu. So middle of page 1340, the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. The Inyan in this is, so he's further explaining this difference. Din Yadua, because now it's known, she has Beis Sibas L'Bchinas Harachimim. There are two reasons or two causes that evoke that to cause rachamim, that evoke and bring out and draw out compassion. And just for the record, this was discussed earlier. Actually, wrote it down here, chapter 230 and on, and the bottom of page 992. So this is volume 1 and volume 2. This was discussed. And here are the two causes, the two sibas. Ha'echadu mitzad hadas v'hargosha. One is coming from awareness, perception, awareness, and feeling. That what? Since you feel empathy and you feel another person, and you're aware and you feel his lack, something's lacking, that's what causes that person to have compassion for him. So you see, let's say a person in need. They need parnosa, livelihood, or they need a bracha, they need health, they need other things. So your awareness, your yediyah and hargasha, meaning that you are applying yourself and you see the situation. So what does it do for a person who has empathy? It causes you to have rachmanis on that. And hopefully act on that rachmanis. But here the point is the actual rachmanis. So that's rachamim, midas harachamim, coming from yediyah v'hargasha. The rachamim elu heim b'chinas kiruv. This rachamim is coming from something that is from close up. You're not aloof and removed from a great place. You're involved. You're engaged. You witness it. And it has a number of different levels. That commensurate to the lack that the person has, commensurate to that will be how much compassion. In other words, if you see somebody greatly suffering or in a very dire situation, you'll have more compassion. Someone less so, you'll have less. In other words, you're relating to the person. That's the first level of rachamim. Beis, another reason for rachamim is from a distance, is from a removed state. That's due to the fact that if the person is exalted, the one who's having compassion is like a melech in his palace, and he's removed. He's not involved and engaged with the conditions that we're talking about that evoke compassion in the first way. Here's so a king, in his greatness, has compassion, dafke to who? To a shuffle, to someone who's in a very lowly state. Not because he's involved or he's aware or details, it's just because of his greatness. He has that rachmanis, ala shuffle dafke. The mishu bedarge ein a nefla of rachmanis. Someone that already is of stature. So the concept of rachmanis, of compassion or empathy, does not apply there. Ein a nefla of rachmanis. Ki im ala shuffle. Only as someone that's in a lowly state. I'll explain in a moment. Let me just finish the words, and then we'll see the difference. The teva hamerumam, or teva hamerumam, huliyas nimshech ala shafel, is to be drawn to the lowly person, not because he's in that same state. On the contrary, is because he's so high. That's why he's drawn specifically. He's not drawn to someone that's closer to his level. Drawn dafke la shafel. Ukiyadu the emek reim, the emek tachas. So there's an expression in the Sefer Yetzirah. Emek reim means an exalted depth. Emek reim, the depth above reim, and emek tachas, the depth below. So there are two different extremes. The deepness in the highest level, they're measured and they're essentially balanced. They're commensurate to one another. So the depth all the way above relates to the depth very low below. This is a topic we learned earlier. The sources that I mentioned before, page 2, chapter 230 and page 992 talk about that. That's why the compassion of a king is more abundant than the compassion of a minister. Precisely because of his reimamus. The greater he is, the more compassion he has for the lowest of the low. So as we'll continue to discuss, this is very different than the first sibba. The first sibba would be the first cause for compassion is you're walking down the street, or you know somebody who's someone like an equal to you, or at least a peer, and you have compassion based on what you see. You see, you feel, you sense, you're aware, and you feel a person's lack, so you help them. And if you don't feel a lack, you don't. If they feel more lack, there's more compassion. It's very measured because you're close up. Here we're talking about someone who's sitting in such a high state, they naturally gravitate to the lowest state and just have rachmanis mitzad reimamus. But it's not finished yet. So let's continue to read. According to what we just said, it would appear that there should be compassion of the king only on the shafel, only on a lowly person. The loyal gaveya, and not someone who's on a higher state. Because reimamus is dafkin the low. So he says no. But we see that's not the case. The mitzad reimus lo yesh cheluk madreges. Due to the reimus, there's no difference of levels. And it's equal. The compassion flows to everyone equally. Now, so how does that reconcile with what we just said? You just said the reimus is dafka la shafel. So he answers like this. Well, he doesn't ask question answer, but he qualifies like this. The reason for that is because even the one that's high is compared to him on a low level. In other words, the king, in this case, the reimamus is so high up that it equalizes everybody. So it's not about that he's only gravitating to someone that's lower than rather than a higher stature. Everything compared to him is shuffle, is a level of shuffle. And that's why he gives to everyone equally, because everything is so distant from him, and that the compassion is coming, in other words, from his distance and from his exalted state, rather from his being engaged like in the first level of compassion. The king, due to his exaltedness, he sees the lowliness of the minister like the lowliness of a servant. For him, they're both equal. From the Sar's point of view, or the Eved, there's a hierarchy, because one is higher than the other, but that's on their level. From the point of view of the king, they're both equally distant. They're both equally low. Low here, remember, doesn't mean they're insignificant, like as in, well, it means insignificant, but not insignificant in a negative way. It means it's like on the level of Sevav Kalalman, it's an equalizer. Everything is equally apart from that higher state. And that's why his compassion is extended on the minister, just like on a servant. Okay, that's the moshel. Now he's going to explain what that is above, and that will help us understand the difference between the two. Because we still need to understand. So why is he drawn to a shofar? You could say he has compassion. He's a great man. He has great compassion. So apparently the vart is because his greatness is so deep, so his compassion is so deep, and it's not because the person needs something, it's because everything in existence, for it to exist, requires this level of rachmanis. So let's see how it translates in the nimshal. As I said, I think it'll become clearer now. And the example from this, Yuvon Lamaila. From this example, we'll understand how it is above. The first level, or the first cause, the compassion that comes through awareness and feeling. That's a compassion from the cosmic order, from the structure of existence. Within it is built in that when there's something lacking, there will be an evoking, there will be the drawing of compassion. There's two expressions in davening. Ava Rachamon, the father, the compassionate one, and the father of compassion, Ava Rachamim. The Ava Rachamon, Harachamon, who are Rachamim, the say the Ishtalshus. You say the father, the compassionate one, is the compassion of the cosmic order of the structure of existence. That compassion comes into an internalized manifestation, Leda, to know and be aware, Ulahargish, and to feel, Kol Nivra v'Nivra b'frat, B'ashgocha protish, to sense, to know and to sense every individual creation in divine providence of every detail. Ulamalis machsede, and to fulfill or to sustain machsede, that which is lacking. So when we say that the Eibishter looks at the world and he sees, like we speak about mekarne re'emim atkinei, that whatever he looks at, God sustains existence from the lowliest insect to the greatest animals. The Eibishter is involved. So there's a rachmim seder shtalshus that makes sure that whatever is lacking is sustained and filled and sated. Then there's a second level of rachmim, of arachamim, the father of compassion, not the father, the compassionate one. The compassion that comes not because involved, engaged, and seeing that which is lacking in each detail, but the rachim that comes from reimamus, from an exalted state that is removed from it all. That's a compassion that comes higher than ishtalshlus. So now we're talking about the Eibishter Yetzer Yachad Levad, the singular, the soul Yetzer that shaped them all, that understands all the maisim. From above, he understands all his creations, not involved in the specific details and needs of each part of the creation, but it's the overall picture that the Yetzer Yachad Levad, Kulam B'Shava, all of them equally. Hagam Desham Gamken Hayidiyah B'Kol Echad B'Echad B'Frat, even though on this higher level there's also an awareness of every detail, individual detail. However, all of them are combined in one gaze, in one picture, in one overview. And this level of compassion is equally on the higher worlds and on the low, just like on the lower worlds. Because they are all equally lowly. They're equally low compared to the reimamus, the exaltedness, and the magnitude of the Eir Ein Sof. And like it says elsewhere. Let me continue to read, and then I'll stop for questions maybe at the end of the paragraph. I'm almost done here. V'zehu, the b'musaf the Shabbos, and this is why musaf of Shabbos, what do we say? We don't say avara, we say avarachamim. Oimnim avarachamim. We say the second expression, avarachamim, the father of compassion. Liya is the b'musaf hu aliyah b'bchinas keser. Because since by musaf, we're going up into keser, the level into keser, v'hu b'chinas harotzen shalamaylam b'chinas islapshus ulamaylam ishtalshlus. That's the desire. Keser is rotzen, arich rotzen, the desire of God. That's higher than manifestation. Remember, Kesed is the gaze that God looks at the whole picture, the rotzen for all of existence. Like, I want to have a home. I want to have a world. It's not the details. And Lamayla Mishtalson, and higher than the actual structure of the spheres. Al Keina Rachim in page 1341. That's why the compassion, when you're on that level of Kesed, of Musaf, of Shabbos, Al Keina Rachim Desham, and B'chinas Rachim and Pshutim. That's why they are shapeless, they are seamless compassion that equalizes everything, because they're coming from that level that's higher than Ishtalshlus. And in general, hu ha'hefresh did b'bchinas gili hakav shenimshach be'elemes la'achar atzimtzum. This is the difference of the gili hakav, the kav. Remember, the thin ray of light that follows after the tzimtzum. And it's nimshach, it extends into the world after the tzimtzum. Shayach inyan arachim shemitzad hergish b'chinas islapshus pnimi. That's where the first level of rachimim, due to hergish, that you feel, you sense. But due to islapshus pnimi, because the kav is a pnimi, it's a individual. It's like where the artist is actually drawing the details. So there's an individual internalized manifestation. That's the kav. And the difference between the kav and the other uba, and this is in general the difference between the kav and what's on the other side, uba ein sof shalifnei tzimtzum, and the infinite light before the tzimtzum, not like the kav after the tzimtzum, but b'chinas harotzen haposhet. There it's a shapeless and seamless desire. Sha'ola b'ritzein l'haitzim, that God, it rose in His will to emanate. So that's an equalizer, and even higher. Remember, we learned there's the level in the divine infinite that precedes even the arising in His desire. The arising in the desire is already a level. So for sure, the level that's even higher than the actual conscious desire. And what level is that, if you recall? That's the level of hu b'chinas gili la'atzmei. This is not the manifestation, the gili as he's envisioning existence. This is a gili to himself. It's before he's envisioning. It's before he's desiring existence. So for sure, it's an equal. This is a state of exaltedness and separation from the general ishtalshlus and structure and cosmic order. Misham, and there, from there comes a level of rachman that's not commensurate to each level, but on the entire ishtalshlus that comes from the kav, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, from that place. So you see here two levels of rachman, one in ishtalshlus, the kav, in general, and one higher than ishtalshlus, the ein sof before the tzimtzum. That's the second level. Now, he's still not finished, because we still have to come back and say, okay, so which level is which? It's obviously going to be clear that dvash, the level of rachamim that is nishtalshlus, is a powerful level, but it's still not the level that you come to through the stress of the sa'ir that we're going to talk about. But he's not there yet either. Now they stopped. They ended the paragraph here, even though, frankly, I think the next paragraph is a direct connection. But since the end of here, maybe I'll pause, since I haven't. If anybody wants me to clarify anything before I read on, I think we need to read on, because this topic is we're smack in the middle of this discussion. But still, let's stop for a moment if anybody wants to ask. Okay. So let's continue. Omnom, however, now he's going to qualify that also this higher level of compassion that comes to Reimamus, is also not completely removed. Yesh b'zeh ksas hergish. There is some hergish there too. Shaharigam amerimim, because even the exalted one, someone that's on such a high level that equalizes everything, yesh le'mekom mokem ezeh shayches al amarucham. He has nevertheless some relationship, some connection to the one that is the recipient, the one that needs the compassion. And that is why, due to that, he has compassion on him. Like a king who's exalted and higher above the nation, the people, his subjects, his people. He still nevertheless has a connection, some relationship with the nation, with the people. And that's why he has compassion on them. And so too, in the example, this example above. Remember, there's an example below to understand how it's above. That what? The gam b'chinas sevav kalaman. That also the level of sevav kalaman, which is another level for what he's talking, another description, another name for what he described, and not the kav. The kav is mamala kalaman. It enters internally, tailored. That also the level of sevav kalaman, yesh lezeh shayches ala elamis, has some relationship with existence, with the world. With below they say yesh le eze hergish, but you can read either way. And since there's some relationship, that's why memela, there's some feeling in this compassion that he's bestowing, and he's transmitting to the worlds. Ukamay beninve, tiksiv eich le'achus, like we find by Nineveh. Nineveh was the city that Yena, the prophet Yena, was sent to warn. So it says there, Ein le'achis. I'm sorry, eich le'achis. What do we learn from that? Eich le'achis. Let me see what he says. Let me see. Hagam shahaya mebchinas sevav kalaman. That's why there was compassion both for the people and the animals there. I'm not sure what he's bringing the proof from Nineveh. So Nineveh was a wicked city. God said to Yena to go tell them to do tshuva or they'll be destroyed. So I'm not sure how he's learning from this, even though
Jonah felt rachamim. Huh? Jonah felt rachamim for the kikayon, for the bush that gave him shade.
But how does that apply here?
Well, if Jonah gave to rachamim to a bush, how come Hashem won't give rachamim to people in Nineveh? Although they deserved punishment.
I'm trying to understand, why is that level of sevav kalam? What's the proof from that to here? No, I understand the story with the rachamim. I got that. But he's trying to establish that even when it's a state of sevav, which is like above, there's still rachamim. Maybe it's in the eich le'achus. Maybe that's lies in those words. What does that mean, the pasuk? Do you remember?
Well, the pasuk actually doesn't say eich. It says "Va'ani lo achus al ninveh hayir gdola sheyesh bo harbe." Lots of people. That's even more confusing.
So what? How do they translate the word achis?
To care about.
Yeah, I thought so.
How should I not care about the people of Nineveh? I don't know. Go ahead.
In Nineveh, the Rahmanes was not only on the people, also on the animals.
No, I understand. That means that it was an equalizer. I got it.
Which is not a usually would say the Rahmanes on the people, but to have Rahmanes even on the animals.
Yitzchak, again, the verse that you've quoted, Achis, what's the context there? That God is, what is God saying?
It's like what Naphtali said. Jonah is asking why, why did you save the city? And God's arguing with him, says, you're so upset about the Kikayon. And he says, yeah, so much that I want to die. And God says, you cared about the plant, which you didn't work for, which you did not grow, which appeared overnight, perished overnight.
So how should I not care?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think what he means to say is that even though Nineveh was not a great, it was a wicked city, so the Rahmanis is not coming from because they deserve it. So it's coming from more of a higher, exalted place. That's why it's from Sevav Kalaman. It's like a Rahmanis that you have even for the lowly ones, but there's still some feeling. There's still some reason for it. That's what it sounds like he's saying. I got to look inside this.
They did tshuva. All the people in Nineveh did earn it because they did tshuva.
But I'm trying to, no, we know the story in Nineveh. I'm trying to understand how is he bringing proof. What he's trying to establish here is that even the higher level of Rachamim, that is an equalizer, also has some feeling. It's not completely removed. Before he was saying he's so removed, he's saying even when he's removed, there is some connection between. That's what he says. Okay, the Sevav Kalaman is correct because it was both on Adam and Behema, meaning it wasn't just save the people. It was on everybody, so it's coming from Sevav. It's a very all-equalizing compassion, and yet there was some hergish there. Maybe because we saw that Yoina had feeling for it. Maybe, I don't know.
But this is a third level, right? This is not Oriental symptom. It's not from the Kav. It's Soviet Kalmin, which is Lifnei Kav. So it's a third. He's not.
I don't know. He didn't spell it out yet. I'm not going to guess. Right now, he's continuing to explain that there's two. Right now, he's talking about two levels of Rachamim, and one is in Shtalshus, one is higher, and even the higher has some relationship as well. That's so far what we've learned. I don't know yet where he's going to go with this. Let's read on. And same by Kriyas Yamsuf. The Omer Maisi Yodei Tevim Biyam. Okay, I think the Eichlech Achos is this, that God is saying, how can I not care about them? Meaning, it's not coming purely because he's above it all. He does care. I think that's the word, that even though it's Sevu Kalaman, it's an equalizer, there's still care. Same thing by Kriyas Yamsuf. What did Hashem say? When the Melachim, the angels were singing praise, when the Egyptians were drowning, so Hashem said, "My siyod tevim biyam." My handiwork, my creations are sinking are drowning in the water, in the river. So you see again a hergish here, not just purely coming from so high up. There is some feeling there. Ma'aseh Yodei. U'kamoikenu b'shoshe, and the same thing also in this root. Gam b'chinas harotzna poshet, that also the rotzna poshet we spoke about, the shapeless, the seamless desire for existence before the tzimtzum, yeshlez ha'shaychus ala elmus, has a relationship to the worlds, to existence, shari ola b'ritzeinei lahaitze, because at the end of the day, it did arise in his desire to emanate. And if you remember what he said before about Oir, in contrast to Kalim, he said it has some adida because there's some element of the definition there. This was on the bottom of page 1336. So therefore, there's Ola B'Ritzeinei. So there's some connection, there's some shaykhis. V'shir ba'atzmei b'keach. And he allocated within himself, as he envisioned existence, he allocated in case himself the resources for this existence. V'yadua, and it's known, the b'bchinas malchus, and the level of malchus, harigam b'bchinas haremim was the malchus. Also on the level of exaltedness and majesty of malchus, harimitzias and ivraim teifes mokim. The existence of creations matter. They have some value and significance. To the point that even though it's created by ayin liyesh, but there's still an erech. There's some connection. From malchus will come the power to create the yesh of the next world. As it was explained earlier in a number of discourses. So that's malchus. Kamoy kain malchus of Ein Sof. Kamoy kain ugamkin b'shoshu b'chinas malchus de Ein Sof. So too is it in the source. Malchus of Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, b'chinas ales harotzen, in the level where it arose in his desire to create. Dagam shemerumam umuvdal mishtalshlus, even though it's a level that's exalted and removed from the structure of cosmic order of the cosmic kol mokim mishtalshlus tefes mokim sham. Nevertheless, the shtalshlus has some value there. Some significance. Now, remember, he went even higher. Let's go a level higher. What about Kaidem Alei Sarotz? The Gama Shalamayla B'chinas Alei Sarotz. Like he said in the previous paragraph, there's a level even higher, the Gili La'atzme. It didn't yet arise in his desire that he wants existence. What he wants existence. It's more within himself, higher than Alei Sarotz. Al Kaponim B'chinas Gili Eir Batzmuse. That too is still some Gili Eir there is. There's some awareness, there's some consciousness there. It's not relating to existence directly, but to say there's no gili that you can't say either about tzmuse, like we learned earlier. Now comes another level. Aval atzmus ein sof, shemeruma mumuvda legamri meishtalshlus. Now atzmus ein sof, which is even higher than the etzem ha'oyer, which means the gili la'atzmei, that's exalted and completely removed from Ishtalshlus. V'nikra melech HaKodesh. Now we're calling it a melech HaKodesh. Shekodesh mitzad atzmei. A melech, the king that is removed. Kodesh means mafdolah. It's sacred and removed. And it's not even a state of gili at all. In any form of transmission. V'nikra melech yochid, sheyochid u'meyuchid legamri. That's called melech yochid, the singular, the exclusive, the unique king. The yochid u'meyuchid is completely alone. Yochid u'meyuchid, one and only. The ein eid milvade, and in that level, nothing else exists. Shelo yesh shum mitzias klal. On that level, it's as if nothing exists at all. U'mamela b'chinas haremus eina shemeruma malei zadavar. And therefore, that level of exaltedness is not one that you say he's exalted, he's greater than the nation, greater than the people, even if he's an equalizer, but you're still calling him greater. Because now we're a level mibilode in elikim. Without him, there's nothing. So he's not in a level, he doesn't need anything. He's in a state of exaltedness. When we say exaltedness, not because he's exalted over something, but he's just fundamentally a completely different level. So based on this, based on what we just said, that even the higher level of exaltedness of a melech still has some hergish, based on this point, then this level that we're talking about now, based on this there should be no rachamim altogether. Because rachamim, we said, there's in two categories. One due to feeling or awareness, one due to remamus, but now we just established because it also has some connection. The king has some relationship with his people, but the level we're talking about now is even above that. So it's not even, so there should be no rachmanis altogether. Meaning rachmanis does not come from that level. And nevertheless, he's going to say there's Rahmanas that comes from there as well. But not due to the fact that he cares, or not due to the fact that he has something in common. Like we've established now, for example, to put it in simple terms, there's a king and he has a nation. This nation has needs. There are people who live in the different municipalities and cities, and their role is to provide for those needs. There they get involved, they're engaged, or even just a plain layperson who sees someone who needs Rahmanas. So he gives him some tzedakah, or he gives him a job, or he helps him with something else that he needs. That's the first level. Then there's the Rahmanas that are coming from the king in his palace. That is not coming because he's involved in the people's needs, but because he's completely above it all. So he equally gives to everybody. However, it's still his people. He's not giving for completely because randomly. This is his people. He's the melech on this people. So although it's in a state of sevav kalam, but there's still a relationship. Then there's a level where he's not even a melech on the people. He has nothing to do with them. What does that mean? He's completely the level of Eined Malvade, nothing but God. He's not even relating to existence yet. So the question is, can we have a relationship with that level? We've talked about this many times. It would seem no, because he doesn't need us. He doesn't want. He's not engaging. It's not like he's chosen to manifest himself in relation to us. It's completely removed and above. So he's going to explain that even that level will be also elicit Rahmanas from there. But it's a different type of Rahmanas. It's not because you have something in common because I'm your people. It's definitely not level one because I'm on your level and you feel my needs. Even level two, it's not, because I'm not even your people. You can't say God needs, you can't call him the melech on the people even. He's not even becoming to that state. He's completely merumam all the way on his own. And yet, we still can evoke Rahmanas. So how does that explain? So that's what he's going to explain the next few lines. So let's read it. Because he's on that level. Because he's completely removed. So there's no Rahmanas either. Nevertheless, he's explained. The kol zeh k'shashaflu b'mitzias v'yesh. This completely removed is when the shuffle, the lowly one, is an existence and is an identity. I'm sorry, hu b'mitzias. He's an existence. V'yesh lo eize erech v'shayches elav. And therefore he has something commensurate, some relationship, and something in common with him. Even the higher level, Sevav Kalam, and like I said, because it's the melech on these people. But then, aval b'bchinas haremos ha'atzmi. So in other words, so therefore there's some Rahmanas there. But haremos ha'atzmi, hari ein lezeh shum shayches klal le'elmus. There's altogether no connection to the worlds. The Eined Malvade, and there's nothing but him. So there's no Shaykh Rahmanas. When there's nothing but God, who is he having Rahmanas on? And this is why we request, with your abundant compassion, have compassion upon us. The compassion of Atzmi. In other words, even if you don't need it and we have no connection, still give us compassion from that level. Just seeing how far I can go here. Let's continue. I'll continue reading because the plot thickens. We want to see what's the punchline here, right? Va'inyanhu, commission is bar liel dibra masla anila deidi. The inyan of this is like we explained earlier in the Maimer, anila deidi in volume 1. They pay page 135. The Pirish Alekei Elam B'Rachamecha, that the God of the existence of the world, B'Rachamecha, you should have B'Rachamecha Rabim, you should have compassion upon us. So we learned there, the Alekei Elam Ukamei B'Rei Elam. Alekei Elam is like the creation, the creator of the world. The level of Atzmus Ein Sof, the Shaykh Alov Rak Shem Beira. The only thing you can call him is Beira, creator. And And Rachamecha Rabim is that level that comes from that etzem. That's even higher than any gili, even the gili himself, which is before the alei sarotz. V'hu shekol hamakifim nimshachim imenu shezeh inyan yud gimel sarachim. And this is the meaning that all the makifim, even the highest levels of transcendence, are drawn from him, and that's the 13 attributes of compassion. I know you'll say Yud Gimel Sarachim sounds like lower levels. So meanwhile, he's using that now in this highest level. Let's see where it goes. So he says, this is the level of Rachim that comes from Remus Ha'atzmis, from the core exalted state, Shemerumim Be'etzem, that is fundamentally beyond everything. So he's not no relationship at all. The Hainu B'chinas Etzem Ha'er, L'mayel Mezeh B'chinas Helam Ha'atzmi. Yeah, the Etzem Ha'er, which is beyond any revelation, and higher than that, the Helam Ha'atzmi, that's altogether not in the realm even of revelation. Fundamental concealment. Now begins a parenthesis. Let's see where this goes. Oh, it's not a short parenthesis. Oh. Oh, I don't think this parenthesis has an end here. One second.
It must be a typographical issue because I don't see an end parentheses to that open one, the first one. For
I just said
even,
that.
Yeah.
I just said that.
Okay. No, I was just confirming what you said.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where the end is so I can figure out the pshat here. I'm not sure. It's definitely not in the next page. The next page, it goes back to this whole topic. Maybe
it's a short parentheses. Maybe the parentheses ends pretty soon after the opens.
Yeah, of course, it's possible. It's possible that it ends after this. It could be after the other parentheses. There's two. I'm trying to understand from the pshat where it ends. I think it would end after the other parentheses, my guess right now. I just don't want to leave this hanging here. I'm trying to figure out just to be able to give you the conclusion here. Okay, well, I'll say this because I'm not going to be able to read it all. I'll probably stop here because of the parentheses, and I'll figure out the parentheses afterwards. Let me just conclude with this. What we see here is there are three levels right now. One is a rachamim that's in the shtalshalus. That's the idea of argosha, where you actually relate and feel, and it's commensurate to each person. There's higher than ishtalshalus, like save of kalam, merumam. The person who's exalted, it's not due to his being on that level. And there's an equalizing compassion that goes to everybody equally. And that's like higher than the kav. That's the oyer before the tzimtzum. And even the oyer legalis la'atzmei. Still, And even there, in the second level, there's some relationship, some connection, something in common, even though it is exalted. And then there's a level of the divine, Etzem Ha'er or Helam Asmi, completely beyond everything. And there, the Rachamim is not due to the fact that there's a connection between the one who's providing the compassion and the recipient, but there it's simply we're asking God in his pure mercy to give compassion from that level of Helam Atzmi. He's going to explain that that third level is the level of the tshuva, min ha-meitzar, from distress, from the animal soul, from within the darkness, that can reach the highest level. Whereas the first two apparently cannot. Now, I'm looking whether he even refers to the first two levels again. Probably afterwards, I haven't found it exactly, but it sounds like the question is, are these the three levels of the three sweetening? The first one being like the first sweetening of the waters are sweetened by the chesed, but it's an ishtalshlus. The second is chesed of kshet, chesed of atik. So it's higher than ishtalshlus, but it's still sweetening from without, meaning it's transforming it like the ava, tshuva ma'ava of tzaddikim. And the third would be dafka coming from the Baal Tshuva, from the darkest of the dark. That's what it sounds like to me. Though he doesn't say it explicitly, but it sounds like that's where he's leading to. So in that,
Helam Atzmi, right? This is Helam Atzmi.
He just said the word Helam Atzmi right now. We just read it. Helam Atzmi. He said right before the parentheses. So based on that, then going back to the discussion of the Sa'ir and the Dvash, even though there were two levels, and he said there's two Sibis L'Bechinas HaRachamim, I'm wondering, when he says two reasons for Rachamim, it's still not this third level. And Sa'ir seems to be this third level. So I'm not 100% clear, because he did begin with two, and now he's moved back to three. So that's why I'm assuming he's going back to the three levels of sweetening. I'm thinking out loud, not positive. So I'll leave it at that, because I need to look into it myself more. But clearly, he's definitely come to a point where he's talking about the Oyer, and then there's the Etzem Oyer and the Helam Atzmi, which is always that higher level of the Rishimu, the Etzem, coming from the Etzem.
The Helam Atzmi is
So in other
higher
words, to
than
be
the
able to
oil.
achieve, to be able to reach the levels that are completely beyond revelation, we need to go into a place down below that's below revelation. Where it's not coming from any chesed, from a nefesh alikis, it's coming from within the very darkness itself is what reaches the deepest source, as we've been learning a number of times all the way through this whole hemshech in the last 20 pages or so. Okay. So I'll stop here. If anybody wants to ask anything, please.
The Helam Atzmi is higher than the oil.
You asked this at least 10 times.
No. You didn't
Yes,
hear
the
what
answer
he
is
said.
yes. The answer is yes.
So, and your Gimel Midas HaRachamim is not in the Helam Atzmi, but this is the oil, which is the four ha'oil Goloi La'atzmi.
I'm not sure what you're saying. There's three levels of Rachamim he just explained. So
I know,
which
this
level
is
are
my
you
question.
talking about? Which one are you
No,
talking
he
about?
said that there is the oil Goloi La'atzmi, and then there is the oil She'inu Goloi Af La'atzmi. Then there is the Helam Atzmi, which is above this also.
He said this before as well. We know this. There's three levels in Oyer. In Oyer, there's Gili Luzulase. In Oyer, there's a revelation to another, all before the Tzimtzum. There's Oyer, Gili La'atzme, and then there's Etzem Oyer. That's not even a Gili altogether. And then there's Helam Atzme.
Right. So your Gimel Midas HaRachamim are the oil that are Koidem Shegoloi La'atzmoi, or this is part of the Helam Atzmi?
He did not spell it out here. I mean, based on what he said earlier, it sounds like the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim is connected to the Gili Oyer, and the Helam Atzmi is connected to Nikras Sur, the root of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. That's what it appeared on the previous page. Now, not so clear. It could be there's three levels in Yud Gimel. I don't think it depends. It depends how you explain it. But the point that he began earlier, like I said, there's two levels. He said Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, with not Teifus Mokim. And then there's the root of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, which is the Nikras Hatzur, the rock, the Helam. That's Lamayla Miyud Gimel Sarachim.
So that's a new thing.
That's what he said before. Now he's saying there's Rachamim and Ishtalshlus. Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim most likely is the second level. Is the Rachamim higher than Ishtalshlus, but still has a relationship with existence. And the higher than that, the Etzemer and the Helam Atzmi is the Nikas Tzur, Butzina de Kardanisa. That's the level that has no relationship, and you can only access it through the darkness, through the Meitzar, through distress. That's how I would probably interpret it, because Yud Gimel Mitzrachim is higher than Ishtalshlus, but it still has a connection. That's probably what he's trying to say. There is Ktsas Hergish, and since there's Ktsas Hergish, it does have some relationship. So it's more like Devash, like the sweetness, and the tshuva there, Ma'ava. Whereas the third level is Sa'ir.
The Nikas Atzur, you said just before, something new, which is higher. This is part of the Helam Atzmi.
He already said that before. I didn't say anything new. If you look on page 1339, he says it clearly, that there's the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, and then there is V'amshachim B'chinas Tzur, Hulei B'chinas Havara Levad. That's higher than Yud Gimel Midas HaRachim. That's what he said on pages 1338, 1339. So, okay. Yeah. As I explained, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachim most likely associates on its own, could also associate, I should say, to tzaddikim. If you want to go to the level of getting it, even for someone who did Averis, real Averis, then you need the source of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachim to draw into the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachim. That's how I understand from what he's saying here. In other words, that tzaddik could also access the first level of Yud Gimel Midas HaRachim through Tshuva Ma'ava. He can access it. But to access the higher level, you need a tshuva mina meitzar from the Nefesh Habamis. That's what he says on page 1340. Okay. Any other questions?
Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question. Rabbi Jacobson. The level of rachamim that we're talking about now, isn't the fact that Hashem at its core, without even having a thought or desire of a creation, but it has like some sort of an inclination that he wants to have one. Isn't that a form of rachamim altogether? I mean, the fact that he wants...
it doesn't sound like that to me at all.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything like that here. Here he says that it's completely Eneid Milvade, nothing but him. And yet we want from there also to draw rachamim. I don't know how to, he doesn't explain it the way you just said. It's possible, what you're saying is possible, but it's like Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu. God desires to have a home in this world, not because he has any feeling for it, and not because he has anything in common with it. You have to keep that in mind. If there's some reason for it, or there's some feeling for it, it's already not this third level. You understand what I'm saying? As soon as... 100%. So if you're going to explain that just he has within him a desire to have a dira b'tachtenim and therefore the compassion for this tachtenim, then I would say what you're saying is correct. That may be the explanation. But you can't give it as a reason. It's simply, that's what's coming from there. Whereas the Melech, once he's already decided, I want to be a king of this nation, even if he's above them all and he equalizes the greatest, highest minister and the lowest subject in his empire, he still is a melech of this people. There's something in common. Like that's what he's saying. Then there's a level, nothing in common. And yet from there too, we can draw, we're going to say that's going to be drawing from the Helam Ha'atzmi, Min HaMeitzar, the animal soul. That's for sure. He's going to say that on next page. He says it explicitly.
You skip one level. You said it drawing from the Helam Atzmi. Why not drawing from the oil that is not Golui, even La'atzmoi? Why
he says both. He says it comes from the oil that's even higher than Gil La'atzmi, And Lamayla Mizeh Mehelam Atzmi. That's the language that Rebbe Rashab has used 3-4 times that I can recall. That's the way I explained the difference in previous classes, if you may recall. But the Rebbe Rashab keeps using like that. The Eir Etzem that's higher than Gilui La'atzmei also, and then the even higher Lamayla Mizeh Helam Atzmi. That's the expression he keeps using. Do you remember the class I explained the difference between the two?
Yes, of course. There is a big difference, I would say, even. So that means
one
that
because one is the etzem within oil, and one is the etzem as it's in helam. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So he keeps saying one level, and then he says lamaylam is that like here too. Hel etzem lamaylam is that because helam atz.
So that means that b'sheirish is given with the sarachmim. Sheirish the sheirish it shayches to helam atzmi also.
The sheirish given sarachim we already established is moiches tema gvuras the atik butzina de kardanisa, which is rooted in the Shima, which is rooted in Helamatzmi. We know this, yes, as he said this, yeah. But it's not the same thing. There's still levels of revelation. The revelation of Yud Gimel Sarachimim does not necessarily mean you're drawing from Nikra Satsur directly. Because you could have that also in Tshuva Ma'ava, even though it's rooted there, but the actual level is he said clearly, is a level lower than the Nikra Satsur, than the Gvuras of Atik themselves. Okay, we'll stop here before the parentheses. We're at the bottom of page 30.